Let's consider this an extension on my main channel video today. If you haven't seen it, head over to youtube.com/timcast. It's titled Far Left Advocates for Censorship Up Until They Are Censored. In the video, I talked about how a small YouTuber, a left-wing YouTuber, actually advocated for a platform's right to remove content that they view as harmful and that no one has an obligation to host others. What happened was he then posted a video later that was placed in limited mode, a limited state, meaning all the features are disabled. The only way to watch it is through a direct link. It's effective censorship, meaning that YouTube doesn't think you're violating the guidelines to the extent where they'll give you a strike or delete your video, but they think that the subject matter you're talking about is offensive and inappropriate, so they restrict it, and it becomes much more difficult to watch. You need to log in and agree to terms. And what's interesting is then that this left-wing YouTuber and another far-left YouTube channel tried actually bypassed the censorship by mirroring the video and then talking about how they're being censored. To me, that's a bit hypocritical. I mean, if you're gonna say a platform has a right to do this, then you can just say thank you, YouTube, for doing what I agree with. Instead, they actively are fighting against the censorship. So it seems like they agree with the principle that they have a right to speak, and it's also a really good example of how if you advocate for rules, they will be used against you. That's the context you need to know as we move into this, because now we have the story up on Vox. The controversy over Mark Zuckerberg's comments on Holocaust denial explained. The hard problem of how and when Facebook should regulate speech. The answer is if it's illegal. I mean, maybe a little bit more complicated than that, but typically if it already is illegal, death threats, threats of violence, calls to violence, incitement, it's all illegal. There's certain territories in which we clearly define when you can't say certain things. Free speech in this country is not absolute. There are rules set in place by the Supreme Court. But hating someone is not incitement to violence, right? There's a clear difference. With more than 2 billion users stretching across every continent and every country, Facebook supports a large community than any nation state on earth, but it isn't built atop any of the political principles that make nation states work. It's become the world's dominant media organization, but it refuses to call itself a media company or take on the responsibility of a traditional publisher. It frames itself around a social mission, but it's a for-profit organization that is relentless in its pursuit of growth. Yes, there comes a time where these social media companies are publishers, right? There's a difference between when you say, look, you can comment on my site, that's not me publishing it, and Twitter saying we regulate certain users and speech, and then they're effectively advocating for a certain type of speech. They'll restrict you. You can't say this, you can't say this. Then everyone's going to say the one thing, right? Otherwise they're removed. At some point, these platforms got to be publishers. The ambiguity over what Facebook is and thus how it should be governed is at the core of the latest Facebook controversy. On Wednesday, Mark Zuckerberg gave an interview to Kara Swisher of Recode. In it, he offered the example of Holocaust denialism as an idea that may be wrong but should be permitted to exist on Facebook. He said that he's Jewish and that there's a set of people who deny the Holocaust happened. He finds it deeply offensive, but at the end of the day, he doesn't believe Facebook should take that down because he thinks there are things that different people get wrong. The outrage was swift and overwhelming. Zuckerberg quickly and somewhat ridiculously apologized. He said that he finds Holocaust denial deeply offensive and absolutely didn't intend to defend the intent of people who deny that. This is what's absurd, right? I personally don't like genocide denial of any sort, be it the Holocaust or the Armenian genocide or the Assyrian, Greek, many others. There's a lot of stuff going on in East Asia and South Asia. And when we have evidence of it and it's historically accepted, we should just be like, okay. At the same time, I have no problem if someone wants to claim kooky, crazy things. If somebody comes to me and says the moon's made of cheese, I'm going to say, okay, buddy, you believe what you want. When people tell me the earth is flat, I'll say, hey man, you go off in your corner, believe whatever you want. The issue arises then when we decide that something sounds crazy and thus it must be silenced. The problem with that is many great stories in history, acts of journalism, sounded like crazy conspiracy theories. We know the government engages in crazy ass shit, and sometimes it sounds crazy if you make these claims. They'll call you a conspiracy theorist. But sometimes these stories turn out to be true, and good journalists uncover the truth. What happens if, the Watergate scandal? When journalists came out, they were saying that there was no evidence of it, and then boom, eventually it came to light. What happens then when, in today's modern era, someone says, I have proof that government official A performed action B, and everyone says that's ridiculous and insane and it can't be true, delete their videos, take their posts down, that's nuts. And then it turns out to be true. That's the problem with assuming people are crazy. Now look, if someone tells me lizard people control the planet, I'm going to be like, yeah, you're crazy. If someone says they don't think the Holocaust happened, I'm going to say, I think you're crazy. But I'm not going to tell you can't say it, because what happens then when someone calls me crazy? And that's the point I was making in the other video that I was talking about in the beginning. These people on the far left are like, yes, platforms should censor because other people cause harm. And then when the platform goes, we think you cause harm, we're going to ban your content, they go, no, not us. Don't ban us. We're the good guys. Yes, right, but everyone has different values. So if you give Facebook the power to shut anyone down, they'll shut you down too, because of course you guys disagree. We're talking about wealthy Silicon Valley billionaires, investment capital running a major tech company. You think they're going to agree with your socialism? They are going to ban you in 2 seconds. And that's what happens. So you know what? Don't give them that power. But now, look, Zuckerberg was taking the high road. He's like, people should be allowed to say these things. And then he gets attacked for it and has to backpedal. What is false? What is dangerous? What's the difference? Well, let's see how Vox handles this. Vox is typically associated with the far left. Let's see what their response is. Zuckerberg's quote has been pulled out of context and sent ricocheting around the world, but how he got to discussing Holocaust denial is important, so let's retrace the argument. Swisher asked Zuckerberg about Facebook's permissive attitude towards InfoWars, Alex Jones's conspiracy-oriented publication. Make the case for keeping them and make the case for not allowing them to be distributed by you, she challenged. Zuckerberg responded by trying to draw a distinction between two of Facebook's many priorities, giving people a voice and keeping the community safe. Zuckerberg said he takes a hard line on keeping the community safe. The principles that we have on what we remove from the service are, if it's going to result in real harm, real physical harm, or if you're attacking individuals, then that content shouldn't be on the platform. But when it comes to giving people a voice, Facebook intends to be permissive. The approach that we've taken to false news is not to say you can't say something wrong on the internet, Zuckerberg continued. I think that would be too extreme. Everyone gets things wrong, and if we were taking down people's accounts when they got a few things wrong, then that would be a hard world for giving people a voice and saying that you care about that. And that's true. I certainly get things wrong all the time. This channel, by the way, probably is significantly more wrong than my main channel because this is me giving my opinions and thoughts on the surface level. My main channel is more researched, right? So take it with a grain of salt. But the point is sound. If somebody posted something that they thought was a true story, I'll give you an example, the one I always give. When the Associated Press got the story wrong about the shooter in Florida where they claimed it was a white nationalist. Should Facebook be like, well, AP, you posted fake news? Boom, banned. No, of course not. That would be ridiculous. So the problem then becomes, what if someone's wrong more often? Is there a threshold? Personally, I still think no. Pushing the anti-Semitic text, the protocols of the elders of Zion would, in this construction, fall under the category of being wrong on the internet. But popularizing that literature has led to violence again and again and again. The Pizzagate theory claiming a sex ring was being run by Democratic politicians out of a DC pizza shop was an absurd conspiracy, but it led to someone showing up at the pizza shop with a rifle. Yeah, seriously, there could be problems. Violence requires context, and ideas and information create that context. Fake news and hateful rhetoric may stop just short of direct incitement to violence, but they're the dry tinder that makes someone else's call to violence catch fire. And see, I don't disagree with that. I just think you shouldn't shut people down if they're being genuine, if they really believe something. This is where I disagree. The disagreement that I have with Vox is not that something can lead to violence, but intent does matter and context does matter. Simply because I'm like, man, I think so-and-so is doing this problem over here, doesn't mean I really want anyone to go do anything. And this isn't even a circumstance where the famous line of, oh, won't someone rid me of this priest? This is literally people being like, wow, this is a huge problem. Here's what I think is happening. If someone else goes crazy and breaks the law, you can't be responsible for it simply because you discussed an idea. If I came out and said, Donald Trump is a really bad person and I don't like him, and then someone watched that video and then committed an act of violence, I didn't tell him to do that and didn't want him to do that. And that's important for everyone to understand that. All right? Left, right, center, whatever your political alignment is, if you oppose free speech, you're first on the chopping block. Think about the far left advocating this stuff. Okay, well, what happens when Antifa then says punch a Nazi? Is Facebook going to be like, well, you literally are advocating violence, we're going to delete you? Yes, people have been removed from Facebook for saying fuck Nazis. Seriously. I should say this, that's an anecdote I heard, right? You should Google it and fact check this stuff. Again, I don't have these sources pulled up. These videos are not as good as, I don't do as much work on these videos, but it's my understanding that people have said things like, men are scum and been banned and things like that. you're on the chopping block too. You know, and this is what my main channel video is about. So let's just read a little bit more of this, because I think we get the picture here of what Zuckerberg was trying to say. And I'll add too, like, hey, props to Zuckerberg for trying to take the position. No, and then I rescind some of that when he apologizes. Like, dude, have an opinion, have a backbone, just do it. Is Facebook a platform, publisher, or a government? Well, it's not a government. That's ridiculous. What is Facebook being when it lets InfoWars or Holocaust deniers peddle their conspiracies on their site? There are many popular options here, but let's consider three. They're an open platform. This is the oldest, most common theory of social networks. They say, but at this point in Facebook's evolution, the open platform excuse has long lost its power. Facebook is making critical choices all of the time. The visibility of posts is driven by Facebook's algorithms. The content is governed by Facebook's code of conduct. And a publisher like InfoWars uses a different kind of Facebook page altogether. That's true. So I would actually argue that Facebook is a publisher. They say what's trickier is whether Facebook is acting as a publisher when it gives corporate entities access to special pages and tools designed to let Facebook hosts promote and advertise against their work. In that case, I think Facebook is acting as a publisher and has a responsibility to see those tools confined to responsible actors. Now, so here's another place where I disagree. I believe Facebook is a publisher and shouldn't be. I think Facebook should just be like, if it's legal, there you go. End of story. Let them at it. And you know what? There are a lot of problems with that, but I think that's the framework with which we need to start and then begin to, figure things out. But for the longest time, a lot of these companies are so worried about their public image, they don't take that position. Twitter is going to ban people for things they say out of context. Someone could say something like, I don't want to pull up any specific examples per se, but, you could actually, well, you know what? We'll look at the Netflix example or the Papa John's example. Saying things that are criticizing racists are considered racist. You know what? I'll give you an example from Instagram. Someone posted a famous LGBT rights poem that used slurs, like homophobic slurs. Instagram didn't care about the context. It said, you use a slur, period, you're banned. Even though it was an attempt to use them in a way to highlight the plight, right? Even highlighting it in a descriptive way or fighting against it is considered racist or a slight against someone's identity. In which case, I think these platforms need to back the fuck off, all right? Facebook is a government. Do they seriously think so? This is, I think, the closest thing to the model Zuckerberg is mentally operating under. Yeah, I don't know if I would agree with that, but I'm not going to dig through the rest of this. Look, the main point that we need to talk about is what happened with Facebook. What was their stance? And this is a really long story. And I got a few other stories that I want to talk about that we're going to latch on to the idea of fake news. And then we've got a culture commentary coming up in just a few minutes, so stick around.